Welcome to Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
We've got 3 episodes coming up this year for me to do some weird, stupid, spooky voice, so I'm gonna let you guys wait for it. I'm gonna let you work for it. This is a very exciting episode of Reap the Spoils. I mean, every episode is really exciting, but this one is especially exciting. Delaila,
Y'all have no idea how long Mark has wanted to do this episode.
Actually, there's an episode that I want to do even more, and I've wanted to do longer than this one, and it's very related. But Delaila, what game are we talking about?
Silent Hill.
We are talking about the 1999 classic in the survival horror franchise, Silent Hill. The game in question that I've wanted to do longer and definitely more is Silent Hill 2. But that's a much harder game to cover, and we can talk about that later in the episode. But we're here to talk about not Silent Hill 2, but Silent Hill 1, the very first.
OG.
So before we get started, Reap the Spoils is a monthly spoiler cast. We're going to spoil the game. Don't listen to the episode if you haven't played the game. Seriously. Go play the game first and then come here and listen to the episode. You can play Silent Hill 1. I've said this before. I'll say it again. You can play Silent Hill 1 if you have an original PS1 copy, like this one right here on display for all to see.
Fancy.
You can play that on a PlayStation 1 or a PlayStation 2 or a backwards compatible PlayStation 3. Or you can buy the game on the PlayStation 3 store for $6. Jason, I know this is how you played it too. I don't remember it being as kind of not buggy. I had a lot of audio issues playing that version of the game. I don't know if you did.
We'll talk about it later. If I did encounter audio issues, then I probably would have assumed it was just a product of its time, shall we say?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, these were definitely weird audio issues just with that digital version of the game. I definitely didn't have issues playing on a disc back when I did.
I never played this game when it came out. This is my first time ever touching the game, so I have no point of comparison.
Gotcha. But yeah, those are the official legal ways to play the game. Where you can get like a physical or a digital copy through like legal means. I know Delaila played it on an original PS1. You played it on a modded one, right?
Yeah, modded PS1 through a RetroTink.
Yeah, it's really cool. We were talking about it off air, but I was looking into RetroTinks like a month or so ago because I'm trying to figure out like a nice way to get my PS2 set up to an HD TV and have it look, good, because there's kind of a shortage of ways to do that on HD TVs. But anyway, yeah, if you haven't played Silent Hill, go play Silent Hill, then come back to this episode. That being said, I have a bit of an announcement to make. I kind of want to change how the history lessons work on these shows now, to the point where I'm going to make them as brief as possible and kind of just provide names of important individuals that I think will be referenced through the episode. And if I want to throw in like a fun fact or two, I will. It's just a lot of times I've realized when I do these history lessons, it's kind of like very early development stuff. It winds up just being like dates and fun facts anyway. And to me, it doesn't really make for a good enough segment to really keep the way that it's been for all this time. You know what I mean? So I'm just altering it to the point where I'm going to make it just very, very brief. So we'll just go ahead and jump into the brief history lesson of Silent Hill. And that's basically that development started in 1996. The game released in North America on February 23rd, 1999 for the Sony PlayStation. And it was directed and written by Keiichiro Toyama, and the music, which I definitely want to touch on later in this episode, was composed primarily by Akira Yamaoka, who is the long-standing composer for the soundtracks for Silent Hill franchise, and most recently he did the score for The Medium,
Oh,
alongside another composer whose name escapes me. So
that's dope. That
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Soundtrack was one of the best parts of that game.
If I'm being honest, like the fact that Akira Yamaoka is involved with the soundtrack for the game is like the main reason I want to play that game.
Yeah.
So yeah, final warning, if you haven't played Silent Hill, stop, go play it, then come back. Are you guys ready to jump in? To enter Silent
Let's
Hill?
do it.
Okay. How'd you guys take the story? Did you have to do some wiki jumping after?
I didn't go deep into theories as much because I felt like every single theory I saw was going into Silent Hill 2 territory, and I wanted to avoid that.
Yes.
So I kind of just stopped. I also found myself injecting my perception of the movie into this game. The Silent Hill movie, I was like, wait, is this happening here? So I can't say I have a full grasp on what's happening, but I have an idea. It's not like I'm completely lost.
Yeah, and what I'll say about the movie, it tries. Like, it really does try. Like, it has the sirens indicating when the town is shifting from the fog world to the nightmare world. It has the general storyline with some like changes. Obviously, they trade Harry as a male lead for whoever is the main character in the film as a female lead. But the bones of the story are there. Pyramid Head is there just because he's iconic, and they decided, yeah, fuck the symbolism that he represents in Silent Hill 2. We're just gonna chuck him in here because he's creepy, which is terrible. It's stupid. It's awful, but it is what it is. And that's what I'll say about that. That movie did make a valiant effort, and it wasn't terrible. It just definitely could have been better.
I liked the movie, but I also watched it before I played Silent Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like had I played the series first and then watched it, I would have picked it apart a lot more. But I think in terms of like capturing the atmosphere, it definitely did a good job, and it even tried to do the like correct camera angles. But this is not a movie podcast, but yeah. I couldn't help but like have that story kind of bleed into my brain, because the way that this story is told in the game is more it's more like pieces that you have to put together, rather the movie actually tells you what's going on pretty much from the beginning, more or less.
And a lot of the plot is actually inferred through things in the environment that you might not even realize are interactable. Like something on the walls, or a book just haphazardly sitting on a table. It's usually stuff you can interact with and read and get more information about the world or what's going on. Something I was watching an analysis video of the game that I've watched probably half a dozen times before, but I wanted to watch it again before we did this episode. And I completely forgot there's a book before the first boss fight that actually kind of gives you a hint of that boss's weakness, which is when it opens its mouth, food into its mouth, and it takes more damage. And it's kind of told through this like really
fairy tale,
like a fairy tale. Totally forgot about that. And there's other things that you can read that give you information about the characters, like Lisa. I believe there's a note that infers that she has a drug addiction. There's the whole side quest that Jason and I were talking before we started recording, how Kaufman, you only see him one time in the game, that the game forces you to see him. There's a whole area, a whole section where you can interact with him more and kind of uncover more of his role within the town. And also that's how you trigger the good ending of the game, the one that is actually canon. So I guess let's go back there real quick. Delaila, what ending did you get? Do you know? Do you remember?
I got just to explain the ending, because I can't, I'm not sure what's good. I know there's good plus and stuff like that. Bad minus. I don't know. I got the one where he leaves with the baby but without Sybil.
Okay, so that's the bad
That's
plus
just-
ending.
Yeah.
No, yes,
Okay.
bad.
No, it's good. It's just good.
Yeah, not good
Did,
plus.
did Sybil survive? No, she died, right?
No, she
No,
died. Yeah,
she killed her in the boss fight. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, then yes. Sorry, you got the good ending.
Basically, the
Yeah.
plus ending is if you don't kill Sybil in the boss fight. Yeah.
Yeah. So you did. So you
For
did do
either
the whole
good or
thing.
bad.
You did do the whole thing in the resort area with Kaufman, then.
Yeah, with the motorcycle and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad that on this, because I did not do that. I got the good plus ending my first time around in the game, like years and years back. This time I deliberately went for one of the bad endings,
Oh.
and got bad plus, which you get for not doing the whole thing with Kaufman, so he doesn't find the red liquid, and but still saving Sybil and escaping with her. So I guess yeah, let's kind of go back to how we get to the endings, right? Because it's a little confusing and convoluted. Jason, what ending did you get actually?
Oh, I got the shitty ending. You just die in a car crash. It was all
Okay.
a dream.
Okay, cool. We all got different endings. That's exciting. So yeah, let's talk about how we get to those endings. So there's the part where with Sybil at the amusement park where she's possessed, and there's a section in the hospital where you find like the red liquid, and you can find a bottle in the kitchen, and like you're supposed to scoop up the red liquid. Is that something you guys well, Jason wouldn't have done it, and Delaila, I guess you wouldn't have done it either because you didn't get the one where Sybil survived.
No, but honestly, even if I did get it, I wouldn't have known to throw it on her during that boss fight.
Mhm.
Like my instinct would have been to shoot her, but she was the hardest boss fight in the game. So I guess like I kept dying. I died like I don't know 3 times before I finally killed her. So maybe I would have. I don't know. I don't know if I would have tried to use the red liquid. I don't think I would have. Like who does that? Like oh, look, there's this thing coming after me. Let me throw something on it. You know. There's
And I
no
think-
hint, at least not that I saw.
And I think the hint actually is not in the game or throughout the game. It's if you get the good ending where you help Kaufman, because he throws, it's called, trying to find the word in my notes. It's called
Oh, it's a weird word. Yeah. Hold on, I got you.
aglauophotis. It's
Yeah.
some sort of liquid agent that
Drugs.
it's supposed to exercise like demons and or demonic parasites or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently they talk about this town. They're doing all sorts of shrooms and stuff up there. So who knows?
Well, the idea is like, what if you play through the game and you save Kaufman and you watch him do that? That's supposed to tell you
That's
like,
the hint.
yeah, right. And that lends to the replayability of the game, going back through when you get to that Sybil boss fight and realize that she's possessed. Oh, I have this bottle of red liquid I didn't know what to do with last time. Let me try it on her, and then it works, and you save
Yeah.
Sybil. And I think that's the hint, but it requires you to play through the game once, hope that you save Kaufman when you can, and then go back and play through the game again up to that point. So, but there, as far as I can tell, there's no hint beforehand that kind of tells you what that red liquid is, what its purpose may be. You have to play through the game in order to get that knowledge and then go back and do it. Which is, like I said, it lends to the replayability, but not everyone might replay the game. Back in the late '90s, early 2000s, when people only got like one game every so often, like maybe
Yeah.
you're trying to get the most out of your games. Today's gaming culture is much different. So that's how you get the plus portions of the endings, and then the bad portion, like Delaila alluded to, you save Kaufman in I believe it's a bar, and you get clues that lead you to finding a bottle of that red liquid within a motorcycle muffler, and Kaufman comes in and takes it from you. and then he shows up at the final encounter with Dahlia and throws it at Alessa to exorcise the demon from her, or
Mhm.
it's a deity. It's Samael, I believe its actual name is.
Mhm.
So I guess yeah, let's talk about the just general the
Premise.
cult. Yeah, the premise, and the cult of Silent, because the game doesn't really tell it very well. And I
No.
want to know, I guess I want to know what you guys were able to gather from what the game does give you, if anything.
There's a cult, and drugs.
Yeah,
And um
basically.
I'm assuming that the cult did drugs, or like people that weren't in the cult were like doing drugs to cope with it or whatever. And they were burning people, and I only
Yeah, old lady
gathered
burns her
that,
daughter. Yeah.
yeah. Like, cause you saw that in the pictures by one of the one of the altars, or
Mhm.
shrines. I don't know what they're called. I guess altars.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then somehow, demon girl gives birth to a baby, and you leave with baby, and that's all I get.
And that's the
Somehow
plot of
this girl
Silent
is your
Hill.
daughter. I don't know.
Yeah,
Oh, she's
so
your adopted. You adopted her.
all right.
Wait,
Yeah.
Cheryl's not your biological daughter?
No, and I
No.
don't know why. Like, there's a random conversation. I think with Kaufman, right? Was it Kaufman
I
that
think
that
it's Lisa.
was it with Lisa? I thought it was with a dude, but you're probably right.
I can't
In
remember.
my playthrough, the only conversation we really had about it, um, yeah, it was Lisa. I believe that you tell that your wife died. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much the extent of it. Like it
Okay.
never. I don't remember it mentioning, um, your Cheryl being adopted.
Okay.
I remember like a brief conversation. He just mentioned it, pretty randomly. It wasn't even like a natural conversation. He just was like, "Oh yeah, like I adopted her."
How could this be?
Yeah,
What is
something.
this?
Yeah.
I want to say it was either with Lisa or Sybil, but I can't quite remember. Okay. So apologies in advance. You're gonna hear a lot of me talking, I guess, for the next God knows how long. So, and keep in mind, like I got about as much as you guys did out of my first playthrough, like way back when I did it. I had, and even now replaying it, I had to really read up and wiki hop just to piece it back together. Because it's just not told explicitly, and it's not that a story needs to be told explicitly to be a good story. This game just doesn't really give you a whole lot to go off of,
Yeah.
which I think is, frankly, I think it's its greatest weakness. Um, but and we'll talk about it later. I think it has a lot of great strengths that really make up for it. But to try and not to bury the lead too much. So there's obviously a cult in Silent Hill. Very clearly there's a cult. Silent Hill is like mostly a resort town that thrives off of its tourism. But it's the off season during the game, and I think over the years the tourism had kind of died off, and a lot of the people that still lived there, yeah, they were part of a cult, and they tried, and Dahlia being like the front runner of this, tried to resurrect their deity by sacrificing Alessa
Right.
years and years and years back. I think 7 years to be exact before the events of the game. And the resurrection failed. The sacrifice failed. Alessa survived. She was badly like burned, and it wound up splitting her soul, and that soul, that second half of her soul is Cheryl. She was kind of split into
I did
herself and
gather that.
Cheryl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's how, and you kind of come to pick that up a little bit, obviously once it's explained in one of the latter cutscenes that
Last
her soul was
cutscenes.
split. Yeah. But also the fact that Cheryl's like so caught up in this, and when Harry does say in whichever cutscene that was that Cheryl's not his biological daughter, she was adopted, and I think he also mentions that they just kind of I did they say they just like found her on like the side of the road or something? If I'm wrong
I
about
don't.
that,
I
In
don't
my
remember that.
okay,
in my
I might be wrong
playthrough
about
in that last scene, what's her name, Dolly or whatever, just says this is Cheryl in her true form, and that's pretty much it.
right, and that's because the whole time what Dahlia was attempting to do, she cast a spell. This is 7 years later. This is the events of the game. She cast a spell to draw that second half of the soul back. So she wanted to draw Cheryl back. So Cheryl tells Harry, "I want to go to Silent Hill," and Harry's like, "Okay, we'll go to Silent Hill." So they drive into Silent Hill, and then um he sees the apparition of a girl walk in front of his car. And also, I guess let's talk about that. Did you guys watch the starting video before you started playing the game?
Hmm.
How about you,
I
Delilah?
don't. What? I don't think so.
Like
No.
the
Did
video
I?
that plays before you even get
It
to the main
shows
menu?
the car crash and shows Sybil
No.
on the
Okay.
bike, kind
So
of
and
tailing you.
yeah, and that's kind of an interesting design decision, right? Because while that shows clips of cutscenes throughout the game of other characters and stuff pretty out of context, and nothing really gives anything away, um it does show the events leading up to the very first scene in the game. It shows
Basically
uh
required to understand what's going on when you
yeah,
start. Yeah.
it's really an important story tidbit to understand, because once you press start game and you load into the game, it's Harry waking up in his car, and you kind of don't know how he got there unless you watch that opening FMV that shows him driving at nighttime, Cheryl sleeping in the back seat, and the girl walks in front of his car, and he swerves to get out of the way, and the car goes off the road.
Oh, I did see that. I thought you meant something after that.
Oh
Sorry. I
no,
thought because
okay,
I know there's a scene that you can get from interacting with the car that I didn't see. Because I didn't interact with the car once I got into Silent Hill.
okay. But yeah, it's an interesting design decision, right? To put crucial information in an opening FMV that most people would probably just press start and skip, because it's not even something you get after starting the game. It's something before you even get to the main menu. So I think it's I don't know. I think it's worth noting.
Mhm.
Um. So let's sorry. Let's go back forward. Um. So they come to Silent Hill. Cheryl disappears, and you see like images or what's the word I'm looking for? You see silhouettes of Alessa throughout the town as you go. And Dahlia, once you run into Dahlia, her whole ploy is to give you she gives you the Flauros, and you're not really sure what that's for until you reach Alessa. And what it was meant to do was it was meant to immobilize her so that Dahlia could use her once again in the ritual.
Hmm.
Um so here's another I guess here's the next part that I want to get into. The Before we talk about all the rest of the levels, I want to talk about the last level, the last area, which is called Nowhere. What did you guys did you guys gather anything from that as to what was really going on with Silent Hill as a town?
As a town, no.
Okay.
I mean, I did pick up on. Obviously, they show you like a cutscene of all like those keystone characters standing over the hospital bed of Alessa,
Hmm.
um, after she's been burned and whatnot. Um, and there's just some material to look at, like Alessa's room as a child. You see the cutscene of her with her mother when she's a child, by the stairs. Um, and then there's all the stuff with Lisa Garland, and you find out that Lisa was actually, I guess, presiding over her in the hospital, and that's how she became addicted to drugs and became depressed or whatever. Was just because of the emotional impact of seeing the girl, all messed up and whatnot. At least that's what I gleaned, because there's that journal after that cutscene with Lisa. If you go back into the room where you left her, she's no longer there, but there's her journal's there. I did find that. But in terms of like the lore of the town, I didn't really pick anything up else aside from that stuff.
And it's kind of just something it's kind of a conclusion that you kind of just have to come to on your own, because obviously there's no explanation of the town and why it's like changing and twisting and all that. And Delaila, is there anything you want to add on if there's anything you inferred or gathered?
I just remember watching a tape, but that was more about like just finding out what happened to Alessa. And yeah, like Jason said, the kids' room, seeing where she all right, here's the thing. In the beginning of the game, I already kind of gathered that there was a relationship between Alessa and Cheryl just because their clothing looks similar, like the way they were dressed. So I always kind of had that in the back of my head looking through this, so it kind of really wasn't a surprise. But I won't say in that last area that I learned anything about the town. It was more learning about, like Jason said, about Lisa and about Alessa.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at, it's kind of an obtuse question, and I feel this is such a weird episode.
Obtuse question for an obtuse story.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, it's like Mark said in the beginning, it is a very, and it's meant to be, I think, design-wise, a non-linear story, because this game, and I think this is actually a strength, that it's very much a game first. And the story is unlocked by doing the game. And it's interesting that the way they set it up, you actually can kind of use this idea of like a parallel dimension, or in the case of the bad ending, it's a fucking dream, to make an excuse that it could have been a dream, and then it's also not a dream. Maybe he's in the nightmare world and you still haven't gotten to the real ending. You have to play through it again, which is kind of a continuation of the story, if you guys are following what I'm saying.
Yeah. And also,
this game's meant to be played again and again.
Yeah.
And also, to add to your point, Jason, by playing the game, like you're playing the game to get more of the story, that even goes so far as to like to your exploration. Like if the more you explore and maybe find something to interact with in a random room, like the more you kind of get of that story and find out what's going on. I agree with you, is essentially what I'm saying. But
well, what was the relation to the town? Now I'm curious.
Oh yeah, I was getting to that. So
oh, okay.
I wanted to know what you guys gathered before I just outright explain it.
Yeah.
Because I feel if I just outright explain it, then that cuts you guys out of the conversation, and I already feel bad enough with this episode, or I feel weird enough with this episode, where I don't want to just have it be like me telling you guys what happens and you saying, "Oh, okay."
Well, we watched the ending, so we at least know. Yeah.
So the situation with the town,
I was more confused when I watched the other ending, so let's see.
The town of Silent Hill takes on the thoughts, the feelings, the nightmares of a troubled individual. This version of the town takes on those feelings, those thoughts, those nightmares of Alessa. That's why in the last level of Nowhere, one of the rooms is just her childhood bedroom, and there's no other place where you would see that other than in this very twisted area. And like the reason Nowhere kind of happens is because she's now been immobilized, she's now about to go through, she's on the fritz, and therefore the town reacts to that.
Okay.
So that's why Nowhere, the last level, is such a hodgepodge of like different areas in the game. There's a classroom there's a classroom room in nowhere where there's just a single desk. Did you guys look at that desk? Did you interact with it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
I think so. You go ahead.
it
It's like
has
scribbles on it.
like like threats and like mean things written on it, like "Go home, freak." It's supposed to be a memory of Alessa's from when she was a kid and she was bullied, I guess, for being the daughter of Dahlia, this crazy cultist leader. Um, that's kind of the deal with the town, right? It's kind of warped and affected by an individual's mind, and in this case, it's Alessa that's kind of manipulating the town, or not really manipulating it. The town is manipulated by her mind, I guess, is a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I interpreted that as the darkness, we'll call it, as the darkness was protecting her from the town. Like it was a manifestation of her hatred and like her for what they did to her, burning her body. But I thought that the darkness was there to kind of protect her from those cultist people who are doing that. I didn't think it was just like a manifestation of her mind or like what
It's
you're saying.
Well, it's like the town exists. It's just like it exists in like the real world, and you don't really see that outside of the opening cutscene when you're just entering the town. Um, but that's kind of how the lore of Silent Hill is supposed to work, and I'm sure it's still open to some separate interpretation, especially when it comes to the changing between the fog world and the nightmare world. The events that cause that to happen are I think a little unknown in this game. It just kind of happens at certain intervals as part of the level design. And you get the creepy, eerie siren going in the background that indicates when it's happening.
And
I think
also,
it's effective. Go ahead.
there's like pieces of the town that get blocked off. Like it's almost as if like once you're in there, like there's no leaving because like the roads just literally break and you can't leave. Does that tie into her emotions like manifesting themselves? Because that's like just during the regular fog world, not the darkness. But I guess that's one part of it that I didn't understand, like why
I'd
the
say
town took that form without being dark.
I'd say that's up to interpretation. It's however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
I think at this point, it's like pretty loose on how you want to interpret it, but the implication still is though that Alessa is what's Alessa's mind and her troubled state is what's directly influencing the town and the bad horrible things that are going on in it. Uh, and
I guess one of
that's
the things that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, because I finished what you were saying. Because I think what I'm gonna
No, I'm
ask
done.
kind
Go
of
ahead.
spins off into something else. Oh,
Talk,
what I was
Jason.
gonna ask was with Alessa. I was more confused. I was even more confused just at the end because obviously at the very end she's you kind of see an apparition of her, but she's grown up and she has the child. So I that never. I was like,
So yeah, I guess let's
yeah.
get into that. So Alessa, the 7 years prior, when it was attempted to sacrifice her, she was already like somewhat grown. So the 7 years later is her having another 7 years of age. So she's older than Cheryl by, I don't know, at least maybe double. Probably she's probably twice the age of Cheryl at that point.
Okay, so it just assumed she aged naturally. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. Um,
How did
that
she have a baby?
it was so okay. I guess let's jump back to the endings now.
Like, did
So
the demon impregnate her?
she was having kind of, I guess, ascended in that when Cheryl gets rejoined with her and the ritual is actually completed, and you get two different core endings, right? The good and the bad. And for one, you get one boss fight, and the other you get the other boss fight. So we'll talk about the bad ending where Alessa is merged with Samael and becomes what's called Incubator, which is just this new deity that they've tried to resurrect. And she's just a glowing Alessa. And you fight her. Both boss fights are pretty much the same thing, by the way. Like, they just chuck lightning at you, and it's the worst fucking thing in the world. But defeating that, you get Cheryl thanking her father for putting her out of her misery, and Harry either grieves the loss and escapes with Sybil, or, like Jason said, died in the car crash and it was all a dream. For the good ending, when Kaufman comes in and exorcises the demon from Alessa, that you fight the demon itself, which is called Incubus, and killing that, Alessa, I guess, still being somewhat ascended and still being somewhat, I guess, godly, if we want to call it that. She's able to kind of reincarnate herself as a child. That combined Alessa and Cheryl reincarnates as a baby.
Okay.
And Harry then leaves with the reincarnated Alessa / Cheryl to, hopefully give her a better life outside of that fucking town. And no matter what, Dahlia gets zapped. She gets lit. She gets zapped by lightning and set on fire and dies.
She gets the hard goodbye.
Yeah, but it's a reincarnation of Alessa and or Cheryl. That's how she doesn't have the baby. She reincarnates herself as a baby. And the only difference between the good and the bad endings, really, it's kind of negligible which one is canon, because the only real difference is if Sybil leaves town with Harry or not. I don't think Sybil ever shows up again in any future game, so it's kind of
really.
I don't think she does. Yeah, I think she's only in this game, so it's kind of unimportant whether or not she survives.
Yeah.
Oh, now I don't feel so bad.
That's funny. Because at first I thought it was kind of like a Metal Gear situation. But speaking of which, what year did you say? This was 99.
99. So this was after Metal Gear Solid. So yeah, I guess that kind of covers the core thing. The other subplot that's kind of going on and obviously playing into specific characters is the fact that there's a big drug problem in Silent Hill, kind of fueled by Kaufman. You get a note that insinuates that he's kind of responsible for the drug trade going on, and thus kind of responsible for the fact that Lisa has a drug addiction. Besides the fact that she kind of like Delaila mentioned, she kind of spirals more into that drug addiction when she's taking care of Alessa, and it really, really bums her out. By the way, it does look like I'm somewhat wrong. Sybil Bennett is mentioned in a later game, so maybe the canon ending is that she survives. I don't know. I don't know what that mention is. It's not like she shows up. She's just mentioned in the game, so who knows? Maybe it's a mention just because she's dead or something.
Maybe she got fired for being a cop that just hands a gun to a random guy she picks up off the street. Here, have you ever fired a gun? No, I have not. Okay, take it.
I guess. By the way, apologies for the fact that I'm coughing. I've been sick recently. How did you guys feel about the voice performances? Did they kind of lend to the campiness? Did you fucking hate it?
It was over. So it lends to the overall, my opinion of the game, which is that it is a game that is simultaneously aged very well and very poorly. In many regards, I can't. The stuff that hasn't aged well, I don't really hold too much against it because it's not the only game. The standard thing, the tank controls. At the very least, the tank controls work better here than I think they do in some of the older Resident Evils, because you do get more range and stuff. But going back to what you said about the voices, It's better than the little the FMVs you get in Resident Evil, where it's like the actual footage of like real actors.
Yeah.
Although at the same
No,
time
go.
yeah at the same time, like it's almost like the voice actors here had no idea what the context of what they were saying was.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the tone of what they're saying is the same the entire time. So it was enjoyable.
Or
It was cute.
when that tone is different, it's like really off-putting and
Yeah,
very unfitting. At
I
yeah,
certain
feel
times.
it's totally fine just because I know what year this game came out, but like Ethan Winters from Resi 7 and 8 has the same kind of tone when he has his one-liners, and it just doesn't feel right now. You know? But
Mhm.
I feel like I'm able to accept it for an older game.
Okay. I think a big problem that kind of lends to the just the weirdness of the delivery sometimes is that it almost sounds like I don't know for a fact that this is how the game is kind of optimized, but it sounds like individual voice clips are kind of loaded in throughout the cutscenes, and it kind of leads to this very unnatural flow. Like in the one scene where you're in the antique shop talking to Sybil, and she's like, Harry,
yeah,
tired.
Yeah.
There's like this
yeah,
awkward pause between them loading in the audio clip and then offloading it and then loading in the next one and then offloading that. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how the whole game kind of comes off with how its conversations are handled. I don't know for a fact that
Exactly.
that's how it's optimized or set. Maybe it was a deliberate choice. And I do have a big appreciation for this game now, a bigger appreciation for this game now, having watched through Twin Peaks, which was a big direct influence to both the game itself and its story, and how Akira Yamaoka composed the music. He was heavily inspired by Angelo Badalamenti, who did the Twin Peaks score. So now, having watched Twin Peaks and being a huge Twin Peaks fan, I have a whole newfound appreciation for this game, because of how inspired it was by it.
Hmm.
Um, there's only one other ending we haven't talked about, and it's one that I mean, I watched it. I've never actually achieved it, and one day I definitely think I will. And that's the super secret ending that you can only get on a repeat playthrough, the
Mm.
UFO ending. Delilah, did you happen to watch this at all?
No, no, I didn't see it. Was
it's
it
almost
in the
like this
video you sent?
ending. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like this ending knows that the voice acting is pretty bad because it like almost makes fun of the voice acting in the ending. Because it's just Harry standing in there talking to a bunch of aliens. Like, have you seen a little girl around here with black hair? And then you just hear the zap and the alien and the picture of the aliens like fucking shooting a laser at them. It's
Yeah, so you can get this ending on a repeat playthrough. You can get something called the channeling stone, and you have to use that at like 5 different places throughout the game. The last point you have to use it at is when you go to the lighthouse at the pier, and you go up to the top and you see like Alessa fade out, and Harry's like, "Damn, I'm too late." And that's the last place you use it on, so that's the earliest you can get the ending. So it's pretty close to the end of the game. Um but you do the channeling stone in 5 different locations throughout the game, and it triggers the ending where, yeah, literal UFOs with aliens come flying in, and they come out of their UFOs, and Harry's just asking them like, have you seen this little girl? And they just zap him and abduct him.
Jeez.
And what's funny is that actually is like a continuing sub storyline throughout other Silent Hill games. There's a
That's
UFO
amazing.
ending and a lot of others that kind of continue that, which is hilarious and amazing. Yeah. Not an ending. It's not a main ending. Obviously, it's not canon, but it's a fun extra that they put in again to promote replayability. Here's an extra ending that you can get if you do this very specific thing, and you kind of have to figure it out. I think it's very cool.
I wonder if all these different endings messes with what is and what isn't canon in the rest of the games. Like I said, I avoided a lot of theories to avoid spoilers for future games until I actually play them.
Right.
I feel like almost as if this series doesn't have like a clear direction in terms of its story.
So what I'll say is it varies from game to game. I feel like this Silent Hill is much more, I'd say, lore focused around the town, and each game kind of has like their own individual stories. The exception kind of being the fact that, and I don't want to talk about it because obviously I don't want to spoil this game, but Silent Hill 3 is actually a direct sequel to this game.
Oh.
So that kind of ties into this game much more, and kind of why this game needs to have some sort of canon ending. With the case of Silent Hill 2, and I don't want to talk about it too much. I just kind of want to answer your comment. Silent Hill 2 has like 6 different endings, and it's kind of heavily up for debate on which one is canon, because there is no answer to that question, right? It's kind of whichever ending you could make the argument whichever ending you get is the canon one, because it really at the end of the day doesn't matter. Some people make the argument of just talking about the characters and their motivations and what they go through, and kind of looking at the endings, analyzing them, and saying, I feel that this one would make the most sense. And it's really all up to it's all up to interpretation. It's kind of like everyone has their opinion about it, but it's really much more about establishing the town and how it works, how it functions, and then putting these individual stories within its walls, so to speak. And that's kind of how that's kind of how the canon is supposed to be regulated, just establishing the rules of how it works, and then getting stories told within those rules, the bounds of those rules.
Kind of, yeah, like a like a loosely connected anthology, so to speak, almost.
Yeah, and again, that kind of gets a little muddled, considering Silent Hill 3 is a direct sequel to this game. But it's not too muddled. You know, it's yeah. Yeah,
She's back.
Oh. Everyone say hi to Jason's dog. If you're an audience member,
Yes.
you say hi in the comments.
She heard us.
She's very excited, yes.
She wants to talk about Silent Hill too. She did not like the portrayal of dogs in that game, I'm sure.
Oh no. She did not like me beating the shit out of dogs with a sledgehammer. Yeah.
Is there any other story bits, any story questions you guys wanted to bring up or talk about? Any characters that you wanted to discuss further?
I wanted to know if there was any explanation for Cheryl, like where she came from.
I mean, that I guess I can work on fact checking myself. I could have sworn there was something where like they just find her on the side of the road.
Yeah,
But maybe
you did
I'm
mention that.
wrong.
That doesn't sound because I feel like this is a symptom of me thinking about the movie again. She's not from Silent Hill. She's just adopted.
Yeah.
Right? Like from
an
adoption agency.
Honestly, I put so much about the movie out of my mind, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But fact checking myself,
wish I had.
yeah, that is indeed the case. Cheryl, maybe it's not in this game, but I could have sworn there was something mentioning about them finding her on the side of the road. But she was found abandoned on the side of the road by Harry and his wife Jody. So they adopt her when they find her there, and eventually Jody passes away. So that's the origin of Cheryl, as far as Harry and Jody are concerned. As far as becoming a Mason, but we now also we've discussed that she was the product of Alessa's soul being split.
Right. And as far as the town goes, like not everyone was part of the cult, because there were people making fun of Alessa when she was younger for
Yeah,
being the daughter of a cultist leader.
yeah, I don't
But
think so, but I don't know.
okay.
It's interesting. Like you look at a character like Kaufman or even Lisa, and there's not really much indication that they're. Well, I guess there's that cutscene where they're talking over the bed of Alessa after the ritual failed. So maybe they are more involved than I'm really giving them credit. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think that everyone is necessarily involved in the cult, but it's possible. It's very. I would say the majority definitely are. It's
Mm.
kind of what has led to that town becoming so you know culty.
Culty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Honestly, at the end of the day, a lot of the story seems to. Yes, as we said before, a lot of it is almost a reward for um, performing certain things correctly in game. Um, but also a lot of it is just an excuse to set up the game as it is. So that's kind of how I took it. I didn't I didn't try to look like too deeply at it because I
Mhm.
don't necessarily think the narrative per se was meant to be the focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the
and
only I didn't even start thinking about it deeply until we started chatting and Mark gave in theory about the town and its origin and what happened. I had the wheels are turning now that we're talking about it, but I felt the same way you did, Jason, where it was like,
It's like Dark Souls. You can go through that and not know what the fuck happened.
oh
Like
yeah.
yeah.
And I think with this game, it's kind of like a puzzle without a reference image. The pieces are there. They're like largely all the pieces are there, but you kind of don't know how to put them together because it doesn't really give you an easy way to do that. And like I said, the only way I was able to really piece it together was wiki hopping, and this is people over the past 2 decades having put it all together, probably largely based on other games in the series, and also like what the devs have said probably after the fact. It's not like they had to do it all themselves, but with
Yeah.
this game, the pieces are there. It's just hard putting them together um without a reference.
Yeah. After playing this game and after talking to you guys about it, and you telling me that the composer for the medium is the same as Silent Hill, I think I have more of an appreciation for the medium because I actually was very middling on that game. Like I felt like it was okay. And now I see after playing Silent Hill, I see so much like DNA there. Like it's almost like a spiritual successor to Silent Hill in a weird way because it has like that two different world theming and the fixed camera angles and the open to interpretation conversation. It's like what's actually happening. So now I guess I'm just saying that because also Blooper Team, who created the medium, is rumored to be working on a new Silent Hill game. So now I'm starting to like the wheels are turning a little bit more
And
when it comes to that game.
I'm very cautiously optimistic about that. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we don't have to go on a long diatribe about this, but the Silent Hill franchise post Silent Hill, really post Team Silent, hasn't exactly been treated the best. After Silent Hill 4, the last Team Silent, which is the name of that team within Konami that developed this game and the 3 following games. Um, eh, Konami disbanded that team because they wanted Western developers to start working on the franchise, and nobody really managed to capture that same magic. A lot of those games, as a lot of Western developers kind of happened to go, they were much more combat focused, which isn't really like what folks wanted out of Silent Hill. They want that. It's
Yeah.
Jason, you bring up that the game is much more about like the gameplay or the story kind of isn't the forefront, but I would say it's much more about the atmosphere. First and
I
foremost.
was
Definitely.
literally about to say that's why I used the Dark Soul reference because
Yeah.
Dark Souls is very much about what you would call soft world building and atmosphere.
Yeah, like
Hell yeah.
and I want to talk about it as we talk about the town some more. And I want to know how you guys felt about navigating the town, but for a PS1 game and the technical limitations, obviously the fog was definitely worked for them very well because it enabled them to work with the low draw distance of the PS1 um simultaneously kind of
That's probably where the idea came from.
right.
Mhm.
I mean, it's the same way that Kojima developed the original Metal Gear. He couldn't have many bullets on screen at once, so he said, "Well, what if you tried to actively avoid confrontation?" And that's how the stealth genre was kind of born. In this case, it was there's a low draw distance on the PS1. We can't really render this whole town as it stands. Well, what if we don't? Right? What if we just render the surrounding portion, and as you move through it, it comes in because this fog is clouding your vision. And it really worked because they made this whole town simultaneously feel extremely claustrophobic. And in the environments, you guys can agree or disagree. The environments for a PS1 game entirely rendered in 3D are super detailed.
Mm.
If you
Yeah.
really go and look at like closely at like some of the textures, like they say a lot with very little, and I think it's astonishing how well they were able to build these environments in this atmosphere on the PlayStation 1 really late into its life cycle, but still it's crazy to me.
One
Mhm.
thing I'll say is I was definitely impressed because they reuse assets a lot, um, especially when you get into levels that are multi-tiered, where you're essentially in the same level multiple times for like each floor of a building per se. But they'll change it up just enough to make it feel like it's different when it really isn't.
Mhm.
Um, which is an impressive feat of design for its time in and of itself. While still maintaining, like you said, the atmosphere, which a lot of which has to do with not even music, the ambient noises, the color palette, um, which again is another limitation that you're kind of working within is kind of your limited graphic goal range, I guess you could call it. But using a very muted color palette to your advantage in that way.
Yeah, I was definitely worried going into this game that it being so pixelated would actually take away from me being scared, but it was quite the opposite. Like even with my eyes being so used to like graphically enhanced things, the enemy designs, the atmosphere, it all scared the shit out of me. And for an old game to do that is really impressive.
I frankly I think this is one of the scariest video games of all time. It's definitely
Oh
one of the
yeah.
scariest video games I've ever played. And I think it will maintain that because it doesn't rely on gore, or it doesn't rely too heavily on jump scares. There are some, but like it doesn't rely too heavily. And I think that when it does use a jump scare, it uses it very effectively. Um the example I want to bring up is if you go in the school, there's a locker room, and if you go in there just when it's the normal school, a cat jumps out of the locker. If you go back there in the nightmare world, like once the school shifts to the nightmare version, you can go back in
Yeah.
that locker room, you can open that locker, and there's nothing in there. You hear like
Hmm.
banging on it, there's nothing in there, it's just covered in blood. And then when you go to leave, a body quickly falls out of the
Body
one
falls
locker.
out. Yeah.
And like it's a cheap scare, but it subverts the expectations of that cheap scare, right? It kind of
Yeah.
flips it on its head. It's like, oh yeah, the thing that you thought was gonna scare the shit out of you, no, it's something totally different. I love that. I think that's so cool, and it does that kind of stuff really effectively. Um,
There's also the use of a lot of. There's a specific word, I think it's a Japanese word, and it's slipping my mind right now for a genre of horror. But the best example of it, and the one that comes to mind first for me, would be like the Ringu, the Ring.
mhm.
Um, the way that this game, and you can tell that probably draws from this, which in turn goes way back to American cinema, like The Exorcist, in the same way that Japan and America have always had kind of a media dialogue between film and various, types of media. But what I was going to say is the way this game uses, in the same way that The Ring does, not even necessarily scary, but just discomforting imagery. Like especially when you start seeing like bodies and body parts just kind of casually strewn or pinned to walls, like
Yeah.
it's just off-putting rather than necessarily. I didn't find it so much scary as it was disturbing, which I almost preferred.
Yeah, same. Well, to me, the disturbing stuff is what appeals to me. Like that's what actually makes me feel like uncomfortable. Whereas like jump scares or like slasher films, like it's just funny.
Yeah.
It's just like, it was
Yeah.
loud. Oops.
So let's double back. How did you guys like the aspect of like navigating the town, getting a map and running around, finding dead ends, and them getting marked on your map? And how did you guys like that aspect?
It just makes me want a remake. Like so bad because it's just it's like that Resident Evil feel, like just and I wanted a system where I could like clear like a room and know that I got everything in there. I wanted that kind of system from it. But yeah, just I felt like I wanted to go everywhere and explore everything. The only limitation was the tank controls were really difficult for me to go back to, so it made it harder for me to want to explore in that way, and the limited draw distance like you guys were talking about. But I just love that kind of level design that is in like these kind of horror games.
And they introduced a really, what I thought was ingenious mechanic, given that limited draw distance obviously brings up the use of the fog, which adds to the atmosphere. And then simultaneously you come up with the design problem of, okay, in the open world while you're exploring, how are you going to know where the enemies are? How are you going to interface with the obstacles in your way? Which brings up then the radio, which that crackling noise. There's no music going on. You just hear the crackling it's almost like sonar as you get closer to an enemy. It gets louder. It's also how you know that an enemy is actually dead, because there's no like health bars or anything. Which is ingenious because it's simultaneously an awesome gameplay element that's very intuitive, almost kind of like Dead Space with the stuff on your actual armor rather than like a health bar. But at the same time, it also adds again to that atmosphere and that level of like off-puttedness.
And I think the way they introduce you to the radio is also genius. Harry walks up to it and just says, "Oh, this isn't working." Okay, he goes to leave, and it starts making noise. And then when he really like goes to walk out, that's when an enemy comes crashing in to a safe room of all things. The first safe room that in the entire game, the first one that you're in, this enemy just comes crashing in after the radio starts going off, and you have to kill it, and then the radio stops making the noise, and that's how you know what the radio is there for. That's the introduction, and it also has a dual it has that dual purpose of there's no other safe room in the game that enemies can come into, but it really makes you think that maybe they can if this one just came barreling in. So that kind of can help to the unsettlingness of for the rest of someone's playthrough.
It's also just fun when I finally get the sledgehammer weapon and like it's just going off crackling, and I'm just smashing the attack buttons, beat up these like nurses in the hospital until the radio shuts off. Like, so like there might be an enemy nearby I don't know about. I think that the nurse on the ground is still alive, so I'm just fucking beating her with a hammer. Like,
I also think to something you mentioned, Delilah, and this won't be the last time we bring it up or draw the comparison. when it comes to comparing this to Resident Evil and like knowing when you've cleared a room, I think this game really benefits from having, when you go into a room, they're much smaller, and if
Yeah.
if it has something in it, it might only have like 1 or 2 items max. It's really easy to tell, and they're also um placed typically pretty distinctly from the rest of the environment, so you can really tell like that's a box of handgun ammo that I can pick up, or that's a belt that's part of a gurney that I can't interact with, you know.
Yeah.
They're typically separated well enough that you can make that distinction between them, and it's not
Yeah,
really an
that's
issue to
true.
like pick stuff up.
And what makes it very helpful is that if you interact with an item that you're not sure what to do with, which is especially apparent in the school, the elementary school, it'll mark on the map. It'll like circle it and put like head or piano or clock. So that's how I knew, oh, I gotta do something there. But the only time that I really wanted that kind of, because you're right, there's only a few items per room and the rooms are very small. But the only time that I really wanted it was when I was exploring the outside,
Yeah,
because there
yeah.
were some like areas that you can go into and like pick up extra ammo and stuff like that. That I actually like. I'm pretty sure I missed several of them, but I did see
Police
some
station.
spaces. Yeah, exactly, the police station.
And
See, this is
they
actually something I enjoy though about the gameplay. So I was talking to Mark. I think it was maybe it was yesterday. Or I don't remember. It was before we started recording this. I actually went through the entire game without getting the rifle, which you actually get from a boss fight. And as Mark explained to me, I completely missed this. It's from the cutscene at the beginning of the boss fight, indicates to you to go pick it up. I never realized. It never even occurred to me after the boss fight or during it to go pick it up. And then
yeah.
once you get a little ways past, there's no way to go back and get that weapon. Um, so I almost there's something about that old school game design that I just find appealing. In that there isn't that, I don't want to call it hand holding necessarily. It's almost, there isn't that what I guess we would today call quality of life. Where
Yeah.
like it will give you an indicator on the map that you cleared a room. And maybe that just kind of goes back to old games that I love, like Final Fantasy VI, where like there's a ton of characters that you can completely miss and therefore miss their stories. Or even in 7 has some of that as well. But that sort of, I enjoy that sort of thing. Just because it almost makes it feel like more of an achievement when you do find that stuff and you do get it. It feels like an actual reward for the effort you put into explore and dig into the game.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is that it feels, it rewards exploration, right? And on those maps, typically the areas, the structures that you can go and interact further with, I think they try to give you a subtle hint that you can, in that on your map they're a different color. So there's like a convenience store that's a different color from all the generic buildings, all the rest of the generic buildings on your map. I think the police station is the same way. So that
I
helps.
didn't even notice that. That's so cool. I
So
feel
that
like an idiot now.
that's okay. It's like, it's something that if you pick up on, you can go investigate, and then when you find that, oh, this actually is something I can enter, and there's more items in here, that's great. Then you're kind of rewarded for checking that out and attempting to see if there was more there. That doesn't help with other things in the town, because you can find ammo just like in back alleyways, sitting on top of trash cans or behind a gate somewhere. But again, it's all just servicing exploration. It's all just rewarding, like, hey, you decided to go check this out. There's some enemies here, but there's also some ammo, maybe a health drink or two. You know, it kind I agree with on the old school game design sensibility, and how it kind of does feel more, it feels more rewarding and less about checking off boxes, you know. Like Delilah and I, we're both trophy hunters, you know. We are obsessed with completing things, and this kind of harkens back to a time where you could be obsessed with completing things, or you might not have to be obsessed with completing things to get through the game and enjoy it. But kind of having that obsessive behavior, it helps. and you're kind of rewarded for it in game with extra items to help you get through sticky situations and things like that. Yeah, talking about the rifle because Jason brought it up. It's I think it's the second boss, the sandworm
The
Yeah.
boss,
sandworm, yeah.
and the camera angle once you're given control back to Harry. Yeah, it's pointing back at that gun rack, and there's the rifle supposed to be sitting there, and you don't have to pick it up, Jason. You beat the game without picking it up.
I just had a shit ton of rifle ammo at the end of the game. The whole game, I'm like, when am I getting the rifle? Like,
Can I load this into my handgun?
I mean, I was content with the hammer, man. Until
Yeah.
the last boss, you can't use melee in the
Right.
last boss. But yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I actually, since we talked about the boss, well, no, we'll get there. We'll finish talking about some of the level design first, and then we'll talk about the bosses. But okay, yeah, let's talk about the levels and kind of how they're structured on a little more broader sense, not necessarily just how they pertain to the story. The school is the first level. How did you guys feel about the puzzles in the school?
I thought the school and the very last level were the only two levels that had actual puzzles.
Okay.
Because yeah, there was like the school gave you the 3 papers with the riddles on it, and you kind of had to piece it together. Although that piano one was a little bit too
This is where I
obtuse.
This is where I was going with this. Is I wanted
Yeah.
to know about your guys' experience with the infamous
I'm not
piano
gonna lie.
puzzle.
Some of them were intuitive. I thought that the piano one was a little obtuse, but after a few tries, I realized, okay, this is a little deeper, and then I finally got it. But one of them, actually, there were a couple where it got to a point where I was just like, I'm looking this up, and when I looked it up, it even said, I'm not even gonna bother explaining how this makes sense. Just do this.
Which
Like,
Yeah.
out of curiosity.
Was it the one where you're in the room and there's like 3 pictures on each side and then 3 things and you got to enter a number for each of the 3 pictures at the end of the room?
Yeah.
Oh, the Zodiac one. It
That's-
seems like a Zodiac one. That one?
There is an explanation for that. The number represents how many limbs they have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing. It like tricks you, right? Because you see like a Sagittarius symbol and a Cancer symbol, so you think you have to count. Like that's for a while. I was like, I have to figure out like what the order is of zodiac. So I'm
Yeah.
like, but wait, that doesn't make sense. And
I think
eventually,
I
figured it out.
I think the first time I played the game, that's where my mind went to. Was I was like, oh god, I gotta fucking look up zodiac shit now and figure out which
Yeah.
one's which. It's like, no, it's just how many appendages they have. So like,
Yeah.
I think there's one with the 2 twins. The answer would be 8 because they both have 2 arms and 2 legs, 4 limbs each.
No,
The
some
only-
of the puzzles worked very well. Like in terms of the poetry. I mean, the only problem is that because you can't like carry them with you, if you forget something, you have to go back, and sometimes it's a far way to go back and to read it. But you know, I think for the most part the puzzles worked. There were a few that I think they took it a little too far. And if we weren't in the age of if this was 1999,
yeah,
and you know I had to go boot up my dial-up AOL for fucking and go look up. I hope there's a guide somewhere online. I would be really pissed off.
Yeah.
Yeah. The piano one, the reason why that one was the most annoying to me is because I felt like the hint was clear. Like you'd match the color of the bird to the placement of the bird. I was like, that's dope. But then I thought that it had to do with the sound of the piano is you doing it right, but it was quite the opposite. And there's a clue that says like, oh, like lack of sound or lack of silence or something. But I didn't even put that together. So I thought every time I heard the click instead of the piano key that I was doing it wrong. So that's where I got stuck. And then.
So did you figure it out on your own, or did you have to look it up?
I figured it out on my own, but I was streaming it, so somebody was like, "You have the right idea,
Okay.
but look at the note again." And then I looked at the note again, and that's how I was like, "Oh,
Okay.
okay."
I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad someone didn't just give it away, but was kind of helping you
yeah,
along. I wish I could have tuned in for you streaming that game. I'm kind of
yeah.
bummed that I missed it. Um,
Oh,
but okay. What other puzzles were there? Yeah, some of them were pretty. Like I always thought the tile one was too like the colored tiles where it gives you like that.
Oh yeah, that was easy. Yeah.
Yeah, stupidly easy. I really overthought the one with the Grim Reaper's list. Where it has
oh,
like the age of people
It's
and their names, and
it's
I wrote it
not
all
an
out, and
anagram. I forget what it's called.
I wrote it an acronym.
There's like a term for when you have like a list of words and then the first letter of every
Yeah.
word forms. Yeah. I
Point
don't know. I
being,
forget what it's.
I I wrote it all out. I still have my note on my phone from when I solved the piano puzzle and from when I solved that puzzle, and I wrote all that out, put them in number order, and because I was like, oh, I think I need their full initials, and then I look at the first letter of each one, and it spells out a word. I'm like, I just needed the first fucking letter. I could have done this without writing it all out. I spent like 10 minutes writing it all out, and I was like, oh, god damn it. So yeah,
yeah. But even
I
that
think
clue was pretty clear. They were like, "Oh, do it according to youngest to oldest or age or something like that."
yeah, I just overthought it as far as how many letters I would actually need to solve it. Um, but I think we're going back to that Resident Evil comparison because when this game came out, it was obviously very it was looking at Resident Evil and kind of say, okay, how can we improve upon this? It's very similar. It's got the tank controls, it's a survival horror game. There's puzzle mechanics. There's like pretty similar combat. Um, I think this game has like stronger puzzle design because all the puzzles don't just boil down to find the thing and
Find
use the
thing,
thing in the
insert
right
into slot.
location.
Yeah.
Right. It's they actually the puzzles in Silent Hill and other Silent Hill games, they make you actually think. You have to use your brain head. Um and actually solve a problem in order to move forward, not just go explore enough until you find the key for the keyhole, you know?
Yeah,
And
that's
I
Yeah.
really
true.
admire that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
me too. And I think that to Jason's point though, like in the instance of the elementary school puzzles where you get the riddles in the beginning, why do we have to go all the way downstairs to read the fucking note? Like just let Harry pick
Yeah.
up the note and I can pick it up while I'm wherever I am and then like figure it out. So that was a gripe for me. And
Yeah,
also
sure.
the rrubber ball thing, like I couldn't. How was I supposed to see the damn hole upstairs? Like I knew I had to do something upstairs. Like, but I could. Thank God I turned on the pipe by accident, and it was like, oh, it's like going. But like I was looking forever for something for this rubber ball, and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, that's
But
pretty unintuitive.
It's
Let's
really
it,
clog
funny.
this storm drain with a rubber ball. Like,
yeah,
I mean, and I think that's kind of similar to like a lot of point and click adventure games from the same era where you'd get like some really weird shit and you would have like no idea how that's supposed to move you forward, and you find it in this
yeah,
like weird way that's like, oh, that's really that makes like no sense, but I kind of get it. I think like Grim
yeah. That's
Fandango has
that's
like
how
a
a lot
really
of my
egregious
thinking.
example of that.
Yeah, that's how a lot of my thinking on this game is, where I have to kind of take myself back to that time period
Yeah.
of gaming. Um, because we're talking about it right now very much from like a post Skyrim streamlined design philosophy that everything follows.
Hmm.
In every genre pretty much.
Yeah.
Uh, and this game, like I could have seen myself if I had played this game back when it came out, being the same way I was when I played Ocarina of Time for the first time. Stuck on the water temple for like a fucking month. Like,
Um, yeah, it's really funny. When I was playing it, Katie was sitting next to me the whole time, and I walked into the room with the rubber ball, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna pick up this rubber ball," and she's like, "What the fuck are you gonna use that for? Like, what are you gonna use that for in this school?" And then later, when I'm up on the roof, I'm like, "Oh, I really need to get this water flowing. I don't know how I'm gonna do that. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna stick this rubber ball in here." And she's like, "Really? That's the solution? That's what it's for?" And I'm like, "Yep."
the rubber ball is also kind of randomly placed. It's easy to miss. I got lucky. I just happened to, because I was exploring, I just happened to pick
Yeah.
it up. But when I thought back to where it was, it's like you could easily just run past that
Yeah, it's a
room.
little
Yeah, and
speck. It's a little pixel.
it's kind of cuz the school deliberately has like a lot of rooms that you can go into that don't really have much more than a box of handgun ammo and a shit ton of enemies. So you can once you get to the nightmare version of it, like you could potentially get in the habit of just like skipping past a lot of those main rooms.
Mhm.
And just going to like the like the big areas, you know. Um I guess we talked a little bit about the hospital as well. How did you guys like the sewers? It's like the only other level in the game, like level, quote unquote. Um
They're
did you
boring.
Yeah, a little
Um,
frustrating too, if you
That's
ask
where I ran
me.
out of ammo.
Yeah.
Because you had to shoot the enemies because they wouldn't, or else you couldn't proceed because it was so narrow.
Yeah.
That really bothered me.
I
And then
just
I wound up,
ran
yeah.
because at that point, like I was in the same situation. I was in the same boat as you, and I had no healing stuff. So, and they did a lot of damage, especially if they hit you
Yeah.
dropping down. So,
And for me, I accidentally I reloaded into my previous save. Once you beat the game, you save the game and you have something called Next Fear, and that lets you start like New Game Plus, where you can find new items and stuff in the through the game on repeat playthroughs. But it also ups your difficulty. So I
Yeah.
played on normal the first time. So without thinking, I start that new game, and it starts me on hard, and I kind of forgot about that
Hmm.
until I get to the school and I start dying really easily to the monster children.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why the hell is this so much harder than I remember? And then I found out, oh, when I started looking up, like, what are some of the other items that I can get on this playthrough, and found out, oh, next fear ups the difficulty. I'm playing on hard. That explains why I'm having such a hard time. Um,
it's also an interesting. This game places a lot more emphasis on melee than say Resident Evil does. So
yeah,
you really do have to get yourself out of that mindset of using your gun all the time, especially
Hmm.
in those close quarters where it's very easy to get swamped, and it's very
yeah,
hard to get out of it once you get swamped. Um,
Yeah.
and then you got to learn how to time your melees. But once
yeah.
you do, it is very satisfying for a game of that generation.
Yeah, so I guess we have Jason's opinion, but Delilah, how did you feel about like that combat being a little more melee focused? I mean, guns are obviously still in play, and there's not much variety, but like they really obviously want you to use melee weapons quite a bit. Did you enjoy that?
Didn't, only because if you would melee an enemy and another enemy was there, the enemy would attack you while you're meleeing. So
Mhm.
I felt like I kind of had no control over that. Whereas if I use a gun, could like get distance and shoot one, and then the other one comes up, bang it over the head. Um, so I don't think I liked it too much. But to be honest, I mostly ran past enemies. I didn't even bother fighting them
Okay.
because I was just
I
so
started doing that a lot too. Yeah, I had a lot of
yeah.
ammo saved up by the end, especially
That-
because my first real lesson was when I had to beat that moth boss with the hammer, and I was just standing next to because you fight it on a roof,
yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
like a big water tower, and I like climbed the stairs. I'm just standing next to a water tower, smashing a giant moth with a sledgehammer. Like,
I didn't even know you could melee that boss.
I didn't either, to be honest.
I did it, man. Yo, that
That's so
sledgehammer, that was a godsend when I found that. Because up until that point, you just have the knife.
Oh, there's
You-
also a pipe, but
You can get a pipe.
Yeah, and I know later on I don't know if you need to do it on subsequent playthroughs, but there's like katana and a
Yeah.
chainsaw.
So
is
yeah,
that hammer too? I think, or axe that I got. And
there's also an axe.
yeah,
The
axe.
axe I got, yeah,
And
but the axe isn't as good as the hammer in terms of like damage.
I think, but I think you can move with the axe. You can't really move with the hammer.
Yeah, the hammer you really have to learn how to time it because you can get damaged. You can miss your swings really easily, even if they're like right in front of you. Like you have to know the distance and everything.
Yeah, and talking about moving with the axe, the combat in this game is much more versatile and much more mobile than Resident Evil. First of all, you can aim and move at the same time. Ages
Brave,
before,
yeah.
like, and yeah, you can move side to side. You can do like a little hop back dodge thing as Harry if you press the right button combination. There is a
I
quick
didn't know
turn.
that.
Yeah. There is a quick turn too, which is mapped to a really weird position. You have to press L1 and
Yeah.
R1 at the same time to have him quick turn, which I thought that was odd.
And it's
I
very
wouldn't have
important. It doesn't really intuitively tell you about it, but it's kind of necessary for that one boss fight, the worm.
Yeah.
But
I wish I
yeah,
would have knew that.
Yeah. I guess let's talk about the boss fights, or even just the enemy variety in general. How did you feel about the variety of enemies? Because I feel like there's a lot more than you think. You know, that you got those pterodactyl motherfuckers, you got the dogs, the children in the school, the mumblers, which are those ones with like the big teeth that you run into, and the big claws. I think you don't run into them until nowhere. The
Yeah.
I like
nurses and
those.
doctors.
And then they have stuff like there are the little shadows of children that they show up in the school, but they don't do anything.
Yeah.
But then later on in the game, they actually start damaging you.
Yeah, when you're
And
in
it kind of
nowhere.
it takes you completely by surprise. Yeah.
There's also bugs and those weird slimy things in the sewers. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Did any of them particularly like unnerve you? I mean, a lot's already been said about the radio noise kind of being the sole thing to unsettle you as the player, but any enemy designs or boss designs that worked for you that you really liked, or
Honestly, the kids in the elementary school were the scariest looking of the regular enemies. I didn't find the nurses or anything or any of the other ones to be scary. Like the dogs weren't scary. And the little black children also freaked me out a little bit at first when I heard the like squeaking. I was like, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah.
In terms of the bosses, I think the only one that I liked the design of was the very first one in the basement.
Crocodile, whatever. Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be the lizard, is what
Or
the
lizard,
boss
yeah, something like that.
is like. What yeah, it's like what it's referred to.
I'm
But
thinking Resident Evil. Yeah, the crocodile. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's probably it's not the best designed one, but it's the most I would say it's the second most unnerving design for me. I'd say the best is probably the incubator, the glowing Alessa when you get a bad ending. I think it's just the way the contrast of the brightness of that boss with the rest of the arena. It creates a really interesting mood, and just kind of knowing the kind of the bleak point the story's at that point, and how like all hope is kind of lost. I think that one really works for me personally.
Wish the fight was actually good, but I do agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, I do want to talk about the fucking nightmare that is the final boss. In that, like, the incubator doesn't move at all and just zaps you with lightning. I think Incubus flies around, but still just zaps you with lightning. Playing that boss on hard mode, I only had one health drink. I could not beat it.
Yeah.
Until I found out about a trick that they implemented to make things a little easier on the player.
Oh.
if you expend all your ammo by the time, like either during or within that boss fight, they have a contingency to make sure that the boss fight ends no matter what. So I used all my ammo before I even walked into the arena, and I just had to run around for 5 minutes until she just died on her own.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. I would not have been able to beat it. I did not have enough ammo, and I only had one health drink. And a lot
Yeah.
of that has to do with the fact that those more like corporeal enemies that are in nowhere, the ones that are kind of translucent, uh that came up and they just kept grabbing me, and even just a grab takes away half my health on hard. I used up almost all my health stuff towards the end of that level because I just kept getting grabbed, and uh I couldn't. I had to use up a lot of ammo to kill them, and like sometimes they respawned. Just
I was in the
Yeah.
same boat. Yeah.
I mean, even on normal mode, the lightning takes 1 to 2 hits before you're dead.
mhm. So yeah, but fun little thing that I learned, replaying the game, is that you can use up all your ammo before you even get to that boss fight, and you just have to run around in a circle dodging the lightning, and it will just die on its own.
Cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think they did some weird thing. I don't think that was the only boss. I have a feeling that the other bosses had some scaling because I was looking at guides, and particularly with the Sybil fight, I saved up so much ammunition because I knew that there was a boss fight coming up soon.
mhm.
Because I knew there were, like, what is it, 4 in total? Or wait, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in total. Um,
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know. And so I had a ton of ammo when I went into Sybil, and in the guides, it's like, okay, you just have to let her expend her 10 shots, and then it should only be, kind of like a dozen shotgun shells or something. I ended up shooting like 50 pistol bullets into her, like 20 shotgun shells. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was just running around the carousel over and over again. I do think they scale the boss health to your ammo situation for all the fights.
Maybe, but
Interesting.
also the thing with Sybil is just once she drops her gun, if you just use the Aglaophotis on her,
I
just
didn't
as a
have it,
primary.
yeah.
I know, but like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That makes it easy.
makes it trivial. You just
Yeah.
kind of have to dodge and shoot for a little bit, and then just use that. It's it's handy. Uh, the last thing that I know I want to talk about before we end the show is I just do want to touch on the music. Um, how did you guys like the more industrial soundtrack of this game? Did that also lend to the atmosphere? Did that also help to unnerve and unsettle you?
Yeah, for sure.
No, definitely the music that was used in game was awesome. I really liked some of the tracks that played during like cutscenes. Some of those, I think they were using like acoustic guitars. Like yeah, I don't know.
The
Correct
opening
me if I'm
song
wrong,
kind of
but
the opening
yeah,
song kind of uses some like more electric guitar sounds, and uh but it's like really light strumming, right? It's not like the guitar is not the
yeah,
focus of that or the majority of the it's more of like a almost like a mandolin, something higher pitch that's the
yeah.
primary focus in the opening song.
I
Uh
don't know. It was a very interesting sound. To it that contrasted very much with that industrial sound that you're talking about that you hear
mhm.
in game. Um, so yeah, no, I thought the sound design was a 10 out of 10 in this game.
I ask
Agreed.
because this is easily one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Game soundtrack, well, really soundtracks in general. I really love this soundtrack. It's when this time of year rolls around. By the way, we're recording this at the beginning of October, so happy spooky month. um this time of year, this is like my favorite soundtrack to put on my turntable. The Silent Hill soundtrack is like definitely my most spun record, just
Chris, what are you doing
because.
in your house, man?
What do you mean? Oh, just like
What's
putting
going
that,
on in there? You just have
putting
that. You
that
just have
on.
that industrial sound playing as you're walking around your
It's
house.
just
Like,
because no, it's just like nice to set a mood, a spooky mood. It's just it's just great. It's such a great soundtrack
yeah,
because it's
and
just
that
so
music is just
unsettling.
playing in the background. And
Yeah, it's
Halloween,
like
the kids knock on the door and open up.
yeah,
The parents are there, and they just hear that playing in the background. Like,
it's
yeah, we're
metal.
gonna go to the next house. Bye bye.
Yeah, it's just what can I say? It's just for putting on like a horror soundtrack, it's easily my favorite one to put on. Because of the ones that I own, it is definitely the creepiest. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just definitely wanted to talk about the soundtrack real quick. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we move on to the final question?
No,
No.
I think we covered it.
Cool. I guess the final question is: Do you guys feel this game is overall aged well, or
I
how
think
well
there's
do
a
you
lot of
think it has aged? Go ahead. Sorry.
I think there's a lot of elements to it, like the environment, how eerie it made me feel, how tense it made me feel. That aged extremely well. Like I said, I was surprised at how tense I was playing this game for how old it is. But definitely, like the tank controls and the pixelation, obviously has not aged well. But it's an old game, so
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, some of it aged very, very well. Some of it, not so much. But I think that the stuff that didn't age well was not nearly as important as the stuff that did age well.
yeah.
I think most importantly, the overarching design philosophy of the game aged extremely well, and how everything kind of came together. Which, despite we already talked about several things that frustrated us about it, still made it enjoyable to play, and kind of refreshing. In an age where every game seems to kind of have checklists. It's like, go here, this is checked off, go there, this is checked off. It's like, no, this is just a sandbox that is extremely well designed and gives you a very distinct artistic vision. Go have fun in it. Even even if sometimes you're laughing at it a little bit because of its because of the time that it comes from. But
Yeah, some of the campiness.
Mm.
yeah, but again, like I said before, it's cute. It gives it character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, I'll mostly agree with what you guys said. Like, I personally, I know Delilah, you pretty largely don't like tank controls. I think in certain situations, I think they work better than free control. Classic Resident Evil with the fixed camera angles and the pre-rendered backgrounds, I think they work exceptionally well because of when those angles shift. um Pressing up still makes your character move forward no matter what.
Yeah,
So when those angles shift, it helps to just keep going forward because you're still pressing that same input and you don't have to shift that in any way. With this game, it's a little different because this game it isn't using any of those pre-rendered backgrounds. It's fully 3D environments. And I
mhm.
do really like that they pull off like the one where you're going into the alley at the beginning of the game, how they pull off that cool like camera swoop where it swoops
Like,
up
I
and
guess I
looks
gotta
down
go
at
that
you.
way.
Yeah, I really, really like cool tricks that it plays like that. And I still think that tank controls lend well to that, but it does get hard with combat sometimes, especially when you're surrounded by enemies. There's multiple enemies. It kind of makes it difficult to really use. But yeah, I think that this game aged extremely well in the aspects that really matter. And that's kind
Mhm.
of why this game still to this day stands out and is still like one of the scariest video games. And I've played a lot of horror games. I know you guys have too, but this game still stands among them in terms of fear factor. It
Mhm.
it really just it really hit where it counts. And I think that's really something special for a game
Yeah.
this old.
Mhm.
It also works in their favor that they chose to go the magic, or I should say, occult route,
Yeah, this is
rather
like
than
more supernatural than
it's I like to call it the Metal Gear trap, and this also applies to Resident Evil, which is where I was going. Is that you try to use a scientific explanation, and then every time you want to introduce some new crazy thing, there's some new crazy pseudo scientific explanation as to
yeah.
why this thing is
There's like some
possible.
plot. There's like some plot MacGuffin or Deus Ex Machina. It's just like
Nanomachines.
yeah, nanomachines. Like that's how everything
Which,
in Metal Gear is
if
explained.
you've seen the latest James Bond movie, yeah,
Um, but yeah, this is it. It does. I think it also helps to the atmosphere of like where this game is much more supernatural than scientific, and the supernatural elements are much more unknown than even pseudoscience that like Resident Evil uses, because like everybody
yeah,
understands zombies and nothing too crazy is going to happen with, well, I mean, I say that, but Resident Evil pretty much in every game goes off the rails in some capacity. But like with Silent Hill, you don't know what's going to be around that corner. You don't know what's like past the darkness, past the fog, and it's not you what you do know is it's just not like another person, even if that person's like a zombie. It could be some fucked up demonic dog or some pterodactyl that's going to rip your face off. um you just don't know. So all right, what do you say we wrap this bad boy up?
yeah.
Are you gonna ask a final question, or was
That
that
was
the
my
final question?
final question. I was gonna ask about
Okay,
like what do you hope from the recent rumors. That was a question I had on here, but honestly, I don't really care. Like Silent
there's
Hill
been so many
rumors,
rumors for so long.
right? There's been so at this point where we're at this day of that we're recording of October what 5th. There have been in the past year alone just so many Silent Hill rumors, and like, look, I'm sure something's coming. We've gotten rumors recently that Konami is planning like a big return to premium gaming. There's the confirmed partnership that Bloober team is working on something for Konami, and it's what else could Bloober, a heavily horror centric developer, what else could they work on from Konami if not Silent Hill? I guess Castlevania maybe, but
Yeah.
that doesn't really seem very fitting. They
There
don't
were
really make
rumors of
action
there were the
games.
rumors of Metal Gear 1, and now I saw somewhere rumors of Metal Gear 3.
Right.
Um
And this is a whole other conversation for another time. What I'll say is that um because this recent Konami report came from Video Game Chronicle, which is like a pretty reliable source at this point. They've reported on things that have come true. They have their sources in check. They have good reporters. They're doing good work. The problem with right now where we're at in October 5th, 2021 is that there are so many people that go on Reddit and leak things that aren't real, and it's kind of muddied the waters in terms of what we can and can't trust. And to an extent, like that's made it so that when someone does publish an article and they have sources that they can't necessarily share, well, people are still skeptical because, well, no, if you're going to tell us that this is happening, we want proof of that. And like that's fine and well, but there's no reason to believe that they're lying if they're reliable and they have their sources in check. Some random asshole on Reddit that can post anything they want, it's been happening so much over the past year that it makes all these things really difficult to track and really difficult to believe because so many of them have not come true.
Yeah.
Fair, I think a
And
lot of it is also, and this goes for both people who are posting stuff willy-nilly without double checking it, and for people who do, check their sources, is so much of this shit happens at a point in development that has already passed, that their information is already outdated by the time they posted it. Like they could be talking about a project that was in active like pre production, and then it ended up going nowhere.
right. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I think about the recent rumors is, and I guess it all boils down to this simple statement: I'll believe them when I see them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
But if there was to be okay, what would you want from Silent Hill? Would you want, and just talking about Silent Hill, because we'll play Silent Hill 2, I'm sure, or maybe it applies the same. Would you want it to be like a remake in the way that Resident Evil has gotten remakes, where it's almost a completely different game, it feels completely different, no more fixed camera angles, that kind of thing? Or would you want it to just be like a remaster in where like they clean everything up and add textures or whatever,
So
but keeps like the core gameplay, like fixed camera angles?
Here's the thing, right? Like, because there's no way anyone that's gonna get this property is gonna just gonna remaster the game, right? Like, they're not gonna keep the tank controls, they're not gonna keep the camera angles, they're not gonna keep that stuff. I don't want a full-fledged remake of this game or any other Silent Hill. I just want them to make a new original Silent Hill game. Anyone, make a new original one, new characters, new story. Like that's where this franchise thrives, is on its original stories within that town. And I think obviously Western developers, like as I said before, like they got so caught up in like making combat, like games more focused on combat. I think that really obviously took a lot out of what made the franchise so great. And that's what I fear would happen if this game were to be remade. And now the first Silent Hill did get a reimagining. It got something called Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which was a reimagining of the first game, but it's not really a remake because they changed so radically, even the story, that it's not really the same game anymore. And that game did have some cool ideas. But in terms of anything new to come out of this franchise, I don't want them to remake this game. Like, to me, this game is sacred, right? And it doesn't need to be touched. And I don't trust anyone at this point to do it, to if they're going to remake it, to do it justice. I think the best case scenario was if this game got a remake similar to the original Resident Evil and its GameCube remake in 2002, where it was fundamentally the same game with some new content, but all fixed camera angles, all still pre-rendered backgrounds. It still played the same, and it just took all that and made it better.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that is like lightning in a bottle. You're not going to catch it again. There's not going to be another remake of that caliber. It's all going to be like, oh, what if we made it third person? Or like, what if we made it over the shoulder third person, and it's an over the shoulder shooter? And what if we really worked on the melee mechanics? Like, no, just keep all that shit simple. That's not where this game thrives. It's not where it excels, you know. And I don't trust anyone to really do that right.
Mm-hmm.
Except for maybe fans. Like, I'm sure if fans were able to do that without getting shut down by Konami, they would do it justice. But I don't trust anyone else to do it right.
Yeah.
I guess before we wrap up, on the topic of playing Silent Hill 2 and why I'm not sure we ever will play that game, if this is your entry point into the Silent Hill franchise, if you want to continue, please don't play Silent Hill 2 and 3, or please don't play the HD collection that came out on PS3 and Xbox 360. They had to work with very minimal of the original games. The Konami didn't quite have all the source code and the source material, so they are notoriously buggy. They have notorious changes that everyone that loved those games hates, especially with Silent Hill 2. Like the one example I'll give is they lifted the fog quite a bit so that draw distance is extended. And how does that help to create the unnerving and claustrophobic atmosphere that you guys experienced with this game? Right? It's much to its detriment. You can see what's ahead of you. That's already a problem. So yeah, if you wanted to continue with the franchise, like, it's kind of hard because you kind of need like original copies of the games, like PS2 copies. I think the PC ports are like somewhat effective, or, you know, at this point I'll just say emulate the PS2 versions, but don't play those HD copies. And that's kind of why I'm wary about ever doing Silent Hill 2, as much as I really, really want to. Is just it's a lot to ask of you guys and of our audience to track down copies of the game like that are the most ideal to play, right? Because
Mhm.
I don't want to limit your experience to something that's half-assed. You know what I mean?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, a copy of Silent Hill 1 for the PlayStation 1 is a couple $100s at this point.
I mean, it depends on condition. I paid for my copy right behind me about 2 years ago. I paid about $60 for that.
Hmm.
I saw a game store selling a greatest hits copy for $200, and I'm just like, it is not worth that much. It's not.
Mm.
That's ridiculous.
Not a
And that
greatest
was
hits copy. Yeah.
that was maybe just 4 months ago. So,
Mm.
like I said, it's hard to track this stuff down, especially for this series, but like don't screw your first experience with Silent Hill 2, especially on that HD port, because it's really bad. It's really,
Mm.
really bad. Okay. I think we said enough. We can wrap up the show. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
No.
No.
Okay. Hey, Delilah, what you doing? What you working on?
I've been streaming YouTube stuff. I actually cut down a lot, which feels good. I'm gonna cut down more, but
Good.
yeah, just playing horror games this month,
What are you
including
playing at this moment in time?
Alan Wake, 8 remastered. I just finished the next game that we're gonna do, and I'll probably pick up. Well, I'm definitely gonna pick up Back for Blood and Metroid Dread, and Fatal Frame.
Cool.
So
Okay.
yeah.
The Fatal Frame 5, right? The Crimson Butterfly one?
Maiden of the Black Water, I think it's called.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Okay, cool. I've said it on the past few. I think it's out this month. I wrote a review for Scarlet Nexus for that magazine. It should be out this month, issue 2. You can get that at fromgamers.net if you wanted to pick up a physical or digital copy of a new independent video game magazine. So yeah, check that out. I believe the pre-launch page for issue 3 is up on Kickstarter as well. So if you liked issue 2, or if you also got issue 1, you want to support them further, you can look forward to that. So
Nice.
yeah. And a couple other things that I can't talk about quite yet, just because I haven't found the motivation to work on them, so I'm not willing to put that out there yet. But coming soon, hopefully. But Delilah, what is the next game that we're covering?
Doki Doki Literature Club.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to this. This game has been on my radar for I think 2 years. I think it came out about 2 years ago. It's been on my radar ever since it kind of blew up on the internet. And now that it's gotten a console port, I am very excited to play that and talk to you guys about it. Delilah, I
Yeah.
really can't tell if you're excited or dreading the next episode.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I need an outlet.
Okay, that's great. What better outlet than reap the spoils? Like, very, very excited about this. Anyway, yeah, you can follow Delilah on Twitter and Twitch at Assassina_san or -san. Is it the same on both of those?
_space. One of those.
Assassina-san. Just throw in a dash or an underscore and you'll find her eventually. You can follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuaz. You can but don't follow him. He doesn't do anything. You can follow me on Twitter at Nibelheimian. If you liked this episode, you're listening on YouTube, please like the episode, comment, let us know what was your most unnerving moment in Silent Hill. Let us know that, or just talk to us, engage with us. We love hearing from our listeners. And also, like, subscribe to the channel, share the episode. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anything, or if you listen on Apple Podcasts, rate and review the show, 5 stars preferred. Really appreciate it. Again, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. And if you listen on Spotify or any of those other platforms, if it would be great if you would go on like Apple Podcasts and still rate and review the show, or if you could go on YouTube and still engage with us, that would be awesome, because Spotify doesn't really have anything to my knowledge where you can engage with us. But anyway, yeah, next game is Doki Doki Literature Club. That should be out this month as well. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
And have a good, well, we'll see you again, or hear you, or I don't know how this works with the audience.
Happy
Before
Spooky
Halloween.
Month.
Happy Halloween. Yeah, happy
Yeah,
Halloween
happy
season.
Halloween.